friends, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be working on this project, and I'm going to be talking about dealing with mistakes in your artwork and how to kind of handle those mistakes, because I actually make a pretty big mistake in this actual painting. So you guys are going to see the mistake that I make and how I finish it and figure it out and what I do to fix mistakes. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of different types of mistakes that you can make in this video and different ways to fix them, and different things that you can do to help handle mistakes when you are, stressed out. So here is where we're going to see me make my mistakes. So first of all, I'm using this Etcher watercolor paper block. This was actually sent to me by Etcher. This isn't a sponsored video, but it was PR. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And I wanted to try out this paper, and overall, I really liked this paper. I thought that it was really nice and thick, and the paint went on it really nicely. I was able to layer a lot, which is really awesome. And I was a big fan of it. I'm definitely going to be using it again in another piece. But what I'm doing right now is I'm applying masking fluid on top of the paper. And this is where I made a pretty big mistake. So all of my small masking fluid things are just fine. All those little dots, everything like that is fine, because I did it when the page was super, super dry. But this thicker area, I didn't fully wait for the ink, like the water, to dry. I felt like it was fully dry, but I knew it was still a little bit damp, and I was like, it'll be fine. It'll dry under the masking fluid. But I think the combination of having such thick masking fluid and putting it down when it wasn't completely dry really, really messed me up, because I didn't have issues with any of the other masking fluid except for this thick area. And you're going to see some of the issues that I had later and how I fixed it. And this was a big issue. This was definitely a mistake that needed to be corrected in a very extreme way. But this is going to show you that pretty much any mistake that you make, you can correct in one way or another. So the first thing that you want to do when you make a mistake is not freak out, because freaking out is going to inhibit your ability to think logically and figure out different ways to fix that mistake. And there's a few different ways that you can fix a mistake in a picture. The first thing that you need to do is look at the mistake and figure out what type of mistake is it. So is it a mistake that you can remove? Is it a mistake that you can make part of the painting? Is it a mistake that simply isn't going to be visible once you're finished with the painting? Or is it a mistake that's going to require some dramatic changes to the painting and or starting the painting again? Those are the different types of mistakes that you can make. So the first type of mistake basically is a mistake that can be removed. So examples of this mistake might be spilling paint on your painting. If you're using watercolor paper, you can lift that paint a lot of the times and really lighten it up by adding in water and then lifting it up with a dry paintbrush or a paper towel. And then you can paint back over that, and you might still see a little bit of it underneath, but trust me, when you're done with your whole painting, you're really not going to notice that. Another example of this type of mistake would be spilling paint or something like that in acrylic. With acrylic, you can just paint over the top of things. So that is going to be pretty easy to fix. You can just paint over the top of it. So if you're making a mistake where you can just stick something on top of it, perhaps you can make something a collage if you weren't thinking about making it a collage, and just stick something on top of it. Start thinking about, is this a mistake that I can either remove or a mistake that I can cover up? And be creative in the ways that you can think of to cover things up. If you're working like on a watercolor piece and you're like, this mistake is not going to be able to be lifted from the piece, then can you cover it up with pen? Can you cover it up with colored pencil? Can you use acrylic marker? Is there something that you can add there, like a piece of jewelry that would cover it up? What can you do to creatively adjust your image to cover up or incorporate the mistake that you made? Because there are ways that you can incorporate the mistake that you made, and that's moving on to the second type of mistake, which is a mistake that you can incorporate. And my biggest example of this is a splatter. So say you splatter paint on your painting by accident, and there is really not a whole lot that you can do about it. For example, it's a watercolor piece, you've got a very fine splatter of a dark color, it's everywhere, there's not anything you can do to make it come off. So what I would do in that situation is I would actually take my paint and I would splatter more of that color intentionally intentionally, because when you can make a mistake look intentional, it is no longer a mistake. It is simply a part of that painting. So cool, their painting has splatters on it. Fine, I'm going to incorporate that. I'm going to make that part of the painting. Okay, so I got black paint up at the top. Fine, maybe I'll make the background black and see what happens. Sometimes you are going to make a mistake that is going to change the direction of your painting or of your artwork. And it is really important to be open to that. Look at the mistake and start thinking to yourself, how can I change the direction of my artwork so that things are going to work? And like I said, some examples of that might be putting jewelry on top of it, adding in a more opaque medium. So for example, watercolor, you really can't paint over the top of something. Your only option is to lift that something. So if something won't come off, you can paint over the top of it. Say you used the wrong color, but you still have the actual shape that you want. Okay, cool. Maybe that can be acrylic. Maybe, for example, I'm painting these butterflies. If I fucked up a butterfly, then I could go over and change all the butterflies to be acrylic paint and have this different contrast between acrylic paint and watercolor, and just embrace that instead of freaking out and scrapping the whole thing and starting over again. A lot of times people want to freak out and be like, the whole painting is ruined. There's nothing I can do about this, but that's simply not true. A lot of times the majority of mistakes that you make in your painting, you can fix or you can incorporate into the painting. Even if you did something like smear paint on top of the whole thing, keep painting, paint on top of it, incorporate it into the background or to the actual art, add more of it. If you make a mistake like a drip or a splatter or a smudge, add more of them, because then they'll look intentional. And the more that you can make your mistake look intentional, the less people are going to notice it. They're just going to assume that it's part of the piece. Now, sometimes you make a mistake that you can't get rid of and you can't make an intentional part of the piece. You're looking at it and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Okay, the next question is, can you cover it up? And what ways can you cover it up? So for example, if you're working with watercolor and you make a mistake, something that you can use is what is called watercolor ground. This is a liquid type of watercolor medium that is supposed to imitate watercolor paper, and you can paint it over things. It will make them white, and then you can use watercolor on top of it. Now this will adjust the texture a little bit, so you've got to be careful with that, but it is an option, for example, if you're working with watercolor. Another option is collaging, using stickers on top, using acrylic paint on top, using gouache on top, any kind of opaque medium. A lot of times little smudges or little mistakes can be easily fixed and blended in with colored pencil. Colored pencil is amazing for lightening up mistakes. You can see I just made a mistake on the eye, and I just kind of used that lifting mechanism that I was talking about in watercolor paint to smooth it out. And the edges are still a little blurry, but I'll fix that when I go back later. And I'm just not stressed about it. I'm going to move on from that mistake, keep working around the piece. Sometimes you may not know how to fix the mistake right away, because what you want to do is you make the mistake, you calm down, and then you start running through your options, right? Can I cover this? Can I incorporate it into the piece? Can I get rid of this? And otherwise, like, what do I do? If you can't figure out what to do, just move on from it. Keep working on the piece. You're going to be able to fix it, but you just need some time to think about how you're going to fix it. So in terms of this piece, one of the mistakes that I made, I talked about at the beginning that I applied this masking fluid when the paper was still a little bit damp, and that was totally my fault. I know better, and I did it anyway. And sometimes that's the most frustrating kind of mistake, is when you know better and you do it anyway. But I, funnily enough, wasn't really liking this side of the piece to begin with. So I think it's kind of ironic that the mistake happened on this side of the piece, because I really wasn't a huge fan of how it was turning out. I felt like it looked kind of random, and I just didn't think that it looked incorporated in it. And basically what happened was, after I had everything all set up and was ready to remove the masking fluid, my plan was to remove the masking fluid and then to fill up this area with silver or a metallic paint. But unfortunately, because I had applied that masking fluid while it was still damp, it started tearing the paper like crazy. And I know this wasn't the paper because the masking fluid removed perfectly on everything else. If you look at when I removed the masking fluid over from the right side of the page, I have no issues, no tearing issues with any of those little dots. So this was because I added too much masking fluid when the paper wasn't dry enough. So at this point, I'm trying to remove the masking fluid, and it is tearing things up and going crazy. And I'm like, you know what? This paper is going to be destroyed. There is nothing I can do to fix this mistake except for cut it off. And sometimes that's what you have to do. Sometimes you cut off the mistake. Sometimes you cut it out. Sometimes you completely change the direction of your picture. If I had to, I would have cut all the way around her actual face because I had spent time on this picture, I liked it, and I wasn't about to throw it away just because I had made a pretty big mistake. So I cut it out, and I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do after the cutout, except for maybe put it on some paper, but I finished up adding some metallic details and then went and grabbed my scrapbook paper. Scrapbook paper is awesome for if you make a mistake on the background because you can cut out your piece and you can either add it to like a collage or like a different background that you paint, but you can also add it to scrapbook paper, which I love the look of. So I went through all my scrapbook paper and I found a paper that I felt matched, and I decided to stick it on there. And I actually wanted to make a frame, so I'm gonna trace around this and cut a square out, and then I am going to actually stick this onto a different color scrapbook paper, and then I'm going to cut around that to create a little frame area, and then I'm gonna stick it onto that scrapbook paper square. And I think this came out so much better than the original. It looks way better and it looks cool and it has this cool layered effect and I love it. And that's one of the funny things about fixing mistakes is half the time you're gonna end up with something that you like better than before. So go with it. Go with your mistakes. Stop being afraid that you made mistakes. And the worst thing that can happen is every now and then you'll have a mistake that simply cannot be fixed and you have to redo the painting. Trust me, it's gonna come out better the second time that you do that painting anyway because you're already experienced and you already have an idea what you want and you can fix any mistakes that you made in the first one as well. So if worst comes to worst and you have to redo your painting, it's not the end of the world. You will do better and it will be easier the second time around. But for the majority of the mistakes that you make, there is a way to fix them, and I hope that this helps you. The biggest thing is gonna be your attitude, not freaking out, not taking it to the point where you're like, oh my God, I can't fix this. Like, just stay calm and you will be able to fix it. I hope this helped. Thank you again to Etcher for sending me this watercolor block to try. And I hope that you liked this video and it provided some useful information to you. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss any content from me. Follow me on Twitch and I will see you guys. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day. Bye guys.